Okay, everybody. I have something really cool to tell you about. If you haven't heard yet about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain here. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one single place. Now, the way that you can do this is you got to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm, and then you can get started. It's really fun. We just switched over recently here at All Too Real 2, and I'm enjoying it so far. So be sure to check it out and let us know what you think. Okay, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of All Too Real 2. My name is Michael E. Cullen II, and with me via social distancing on Facebook Messenger is my best friend, my hetero life mate, my brother from another mother. What is your name, sir?
Matthew Homelander Haas.
Homelander Haas, okay.
Yeah.
Like on The Boys.
Yeah.
So you think you're like an Aryan-looking asshole superhero?
No, I'm just the opposite of him. I just call myself Homelander to piss him off.
Oh, okay, I get you. Just like I call myself Sheldon. Anyways, to piss off the Big Bang Theory. Anyways, wait, no, I don't do that. You call yourself. Anyways, so, today's episode, we have character actor Troy Evans, who has been in a lot of things. Currently, he's on the TV show Bosch on Amazon Prime. He's probably most familiar to people for the over 100 episodes of ER he appeared on as Francis Frank Martin, the desk clerk on the TV show. He was in Demolition Man. He was in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He was in The Frighteners. He was in Teen Wolf. He was in Under Siege. He was in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. There's a lot of things he's been in. So you've seen him somewhere. He was in the TV show China Beach about the Vietnam War. He also served in Vietnam as a soldier, which he talks about in the interview. Great stories, I'll tell you that. This guy is a great storyteller. He's lived a very interesting life, and I think it's one of my favorite interviews so far because he was just very cool with all of his stories. So here is my interview with Troy Evans. How are things going with all the craziness in the world for you today? Everything okay?
Well, yeah, I'm one of those people who's pretty appalled by the political situation, and I can't wait till November 3rd. And we'll get through it. But I'm 72, and I'm a child of the 60s, and a Vietnam vet, and I thought I'd seen my worst and weirdest days. And now, a thought I've had repeatedly here recently is that people who are your age and younger, people who are 20 and 16 and 14, and when they're my age and people are wanking about whatever it is that's going south then, they'll say, "Oh, man, you should have been around in 2020, dude."
For sure.
I told a friend the other day, I said, I feel like I'm afraid to bend over. I think bats will come flying out of my ass. He said, "Yeah, and they'll probably be Louisville Sluggers." So
that's a good one.
That was pretty good. Oh, ouch!
With splinters and all. Yeah, I agree with you there. I know I can't wait till November 3rd either. So hopefully things get better. I'm just hoping that, and
yeah. It's the level of just batshit crazy is just off the charts.
First off, I just wanted to ask what got you interested in like entertainment and everything and acting and all that. So,
well, what happened for me is not totally unique, but fairly unusual. I grew up in a little tiny town up in Montana, and my grandfather was a politician in Montana. He was a state senator, and he was very active in the Republican Party, and he was the boxing commissioner for the state of Montana, and I was avidly interested in politics from the time I was a little kid. I can remember, listening to the political conventions on the radio in like 1952. So I was 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
Sitting and listening to the conventions. And then in high school, I was a page in the state legislature, and I was student body president at my high school, and I had a plan. And the plan was I was going to get out of high school. I was going to be the first person in my family to go to college. I was going to get a law degree. I was going to get in the legislature. From the legislature, I was going to become the governor of Montana. Then I was going to be the senator from Montana. And then I was going to be the first candidate for president from a western state. That was my plan. And I was public about it, and people trusted me. I had my high school annual, lots of people saying, remember me when you're president, So then I started college in 1966, and I was, and to tell you how much things have changed, I had a 1950 Chevy, and I got in it with my suitcase full of clothes to head down to Missoula to go to college. And my folks gave me $100.
Wow.
To go to college. But I had a rock and roll band, Gangrene. And we were playing gigs and that. And you could do that in those days. I mean, I could have worked in a restaurant or something. My thing was rock and roll. But you could actually work your way through college in those days without running up a gigantic debt.
Yeah.
But when you're taking the rock and roll route, sometimes that means that 8 o'clock in the morning class, you're not actually getting over there, or the 11 o'clock in the morning class, or the 2 o'clock in the afternoon class. That's still kind of pushing it. And the upshot of that was, in those days, if you didn't maintain a 2-point, which is a low bar, a 2-point is staying awake in class, you got drafted. And that's what happened to me. I took a gap year in Southeast Asia. I ended up in the 25th Infantry Division, 68, 69. And when I came home, I was a different guy, and I didn't know it. I can remember thinking this, and it's so bizarre when you think about it. I thought that I was exactly the same, but somehow magically in that 2 years I was in the Army, that everybody else in Montana turned into assholes. And instead of going back to school, I opened a rock and roll bar. I had a rock and roll bar up in Northwest Montana called the Powder Keg, ironically. And turns out that's not a good profession for an alcoholic.
Oh, wow.
And I was a streper's alcoholic. Man, I started getting arrested on a fairly regular basis, and somebody would get out of line in the bar, and instead of putting them out of the bar, I'd just kick the holy living shit out of them and throw them out in the alley. And I get hauled over to the justice of the peace, and I'd get a stern warning and a $65 fine, and then this guy was obnoxious. He grabbed this woman's ass, and the woman objected, and then the husband got in it, and the perpetrator slapped the husband, and I went over to the bar and really messed that guy up. Broke his legs, both his legs. Dislocated his shoulder, skull fracture, brain concussion. Middle of January, hauled him up, threw him out in the street in front of the bar. But that gentleman happened to be an attorney. And when you pull that shit with an attorney, you don't get the stern warning and the $65 fine.
No.
And there were a lot of other. I mean, I was really out of control. I ended up with a 46-year sentence, Montana State Prison. 46 years, hard labor, for aggravated assault, which is essentially an attempted murder. And there's it's like a 4-hour story. But in the interim, I had, not because I thought I needed help, but as a legal ploy, I committed myself to the Veterans Hospital down in Sheridan, Wyoming, in the alcohol ward. And at the time, my attorney asked me, he said, well, Troy, he said, are you an alcoholic? I said, no, I'm not an alcoholic. But the beauty of it is, since I drink like a fifth and a half a day, I think I can make them think I am. And I was actually able to convince them. So then I came back and I got a plea bargain. I plead guilty to it, and I'd get a 6-year suspended sentence. But you remember I mentioned my grandfather had been a politician in Montana? Yeah. Well, he had run 3 times against a guy named W.W. Leslie, and he'd beaten him all 3 times. And W.W. Leslie was my judge.
Oh, wow.
And I have my grandfather's name. So I came in that Monday morning, and I met with the prosecuting attorney just before we went in court. We made the plea deal, and I went in and entered the plea. And instead of the 6 years suspended, the judge gave me 40 years hard labor. And I turned to my attorney and said, what the hell am I going to do? And my attorney, who was court-appointed attorney, all my money was gone by this point, he said, oh, I don't know, Troy. He said, I have to move my office this afternoon. Best of luck to you, son. Shook my hand, out the door. They've got me in the handcuffs. They're taking me out. The prosecutor is pleading with the judge, trying to explain to him, no, this isn't, he's supposed to be getting suspended. And the judge said, well, he was this a bad boy, and he had a gun. He said, no, Your Honor, there's no gun involved in this. He said, well, what was he supposed to get? He said, 6 years suspended. He said, well, bring him back. So they brought me back, and he says, I'm revising the sentence. So I think he's going to take it. He doesn't take the 40 off. He says, I'm sentencing the defendant to 40 years hard labor plus 6 years suspended. So now I got the 46. But
wow.
The miracle of miracles, it was that fucking around right there that automatically put it in a system where the sentence is reviewed. So I went down to Montana State Prison. I was down there about 2 years, about the same length of time I was in Vietnam, and which at the time seemed like the worst. I thought it was the end of my life, But in retrospect, if he hadn't done that, no way in hell I would have sobered up.
Yeah.
No way in hell, and I would either be dead or in prison for sure now if he put me out on probation. But in that 2 years was enough for me to go, no, I will, and none of that one day at a time stuff. This is, if I get to where I have to have a drink, I'll just stick the gun in my mouth and be done with it, because that's a lot quicker way to kill yourself. But now, while I'm sitting in a prison and I'm trying to figure out if I get out, what I'm going to do, I realize I can't own a bar anymore. Convicted felon.
Yeah. Can't
go to law school. Can't be a teacher. Can't be a police officer. Can't go back in the service. What the hell am I going to do? And one day I went, I'll bet nobody ever asks an actor if he has a felony conviction. And I sent in what they call a kite, which is when you send a message in the prison system. There's a little box you put the kites in, ask for a copy of Hamlet. And I have that. I still have that with the warden's stamp in the front. Inmate Evans has permission to keep in his cell Hamlet. I was sitting there in my little cell, and that prison was built in the 1860s. I mean, it was a dungeon. I'm sitting in that little cement room going, to be or not to be. So then got out 2 years later, the Sentencing Commission, and they looked at everything, and they decided to cut me loose. And then I went down to Bozeman for that Montana State University in their theater program. And I don't know how many actors you've talked to. A lot of that. Yeah. I within about 3 months down there, I had made the startling discovery that I was probably the greatest living actor in the English-speaking world. But I'm pretty fucking good at this shit. Well, by that time I'm like 26 years old or something, and I'm a war veteran, and I'm a ex-convict, and all the guys that I'm reading against are like 18-year-old high school kids. Of course I'm going to get the good parts. So, and then that following spring, I went to California on spring break to see an old girlfriend in Berkeley. And while I was there, I auditioned for a summer theater. I saw posters around the campus at Berkeley and went and auditioned. And I wasn't trying to get a job, because that was at a place called Pacific Conservatory of Performing Arts, which was actually at a junior college, John Hancock Junior College in Santa Maria, California. And they had what it turns out was a very prestigious summer theater program. Now, I was at Montana State University. I was not going to spend my summer at a junior college, but I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to go in and try my pieces. So I went in, I did my 2 audition pieces, and it turns out the guy was a guy named Donovan Marley. I'm still friends with him. He's a marvelous human being, and he was like one of the 3 most important people in the theater in the state of California, unbeknownst to me. Oh, wow. And I did the two pieces, and he said, "Oh, very interesting." He said, "What's your song?" And I said, "Well, I don't sing." And he said, "Oh, it's okay. It doesn't have to be a prepared song. Just a little happy birthday or anything, just so I can get an idea of your timbre." And I said, "Maybe you didn't hear me, pal. I said I don't sing." And I look over, and the accompanist, the guy I also know well these many years later, Bruce Seavey, is looking at me like I'm Lex Luthor. It's like, holy shit, where did this animal come from? But got back to Montana. He sent me an offer for the summer, $600. To come do their summer theater. And the big stroke of luck was I knew a guy from Montana who was teaching at the college in Salinas, California. And so rather than just turn it down, I called this guy up and said, this guy Donovan Marley wants me to come down there. And he said, "Troy, if Donovan Marley offered you a job, you have to take that job." Wow. So I went down, and I didn't like it. And it's one of those things, I don't know if you've ever been on it. It was like a 3-day drive driving from Bozeman down to Santa Maria, and every mile I drove, I got a little crustier, thinking, "Oh, he's got his buddies down there, and I'm going to be, doing little tiny parts. These kids down there in the junior college will have the big parts on." And here's just one. I mean, this is one tiny example, but do you know the show I'm on now, Bosch?
Yeah.
The show on Amazon?
Yeah.
The executive producer of that show is Eric Overmyer, who is a top-tier television writer and producer. Mm-hmm. And I met him that summer, 1976, at PCPA in Santa Maria, California. Now, this is, 44 years later, I'm working for him on television in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And, I did 129 episodes of ER. I knew John Wells because his first wife was an actress at Pacific Conservatory of Performing Arts, and I met him through her. And that's just two examples. There's a million of them.
Yeah.
Of basically my wife, Heather Ann McClarty, was a prop builder at PCP. I met her that pretty much my whole life came out of that one rasty audition where Donovan overlooked my obnoxious behavior and hired me anyway. So that's a long answer to a little question.
Well, that's a good story. I'm just glad you didn't end up in prison the rest of your life, so you were able to, share your love for acting that you figured out through Hamlet and everything. It's just, I don't know, that was a good story. Anyways, sorry, didn't expect that for some reason, but yeah,
hardly anybody else has that story.
that is the most unique story I've heard yet on the show, at least.
Hi, folks. This is Michael E. Cullen II from the podcast that you're listening to right now, along with
manager Matthew Haas.
You got promoted?
Yes.
Damn it. Okay, anyways, folks, do you like the show Superstore? I don't know. I asked the folks and nobody's answering me.
Because they're not here.
Oh,
but we love
damn it. Yeah, we love it, though. Okay, folks, if you like it as much as we do, you're really going to like the Super Story podcast, which is a podcast where Matthew and I go episode by episode and give our little opinions and thoughts on it. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. Just depends on how we're feeling.
Yeah.
And, so if you like this podcast and like our little crazy banter,
then you should definitely check this out. Or I might get sad. And when I get sad, it gets pretty sad.
Yeah,
so
I can't deal with him when he's sad.
Yeah, no one can really. So,
yeah. So check out Super Story Podcast right here where you get this podcast, Super Story Podcast.
What was the first big project that you got involved with?
Well, the first big one, was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Nice.
And that's another good story. I'd started working in television, but in a very small way. At this time, this is like about we could look up when Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was, but around 1980, 82, somewhere in there. And at that point, what I was doing, I'd gone through a few seasons at the theater I talked about in Santa Maria. And through being there, I'd met these guys who ran like Center Stage Baltimore and South Coast Rep in Costa Mesa and the Arizona Theater Company, all those what they call the regional theaters. And so I was getting those jobs, and I'd go to Arizona and do a play. And then when the play was over, I'd come back. I was sharing a little house in North Hollywood with a bunch of other actors, and come back and try to get in TV work. And what I was getting at that time, for the most part, was I've always been cast as cops, which is kind of ironic. And I'd be, the third cop. We'd have a big scene, and I'd be the guy that comes third guy through the door, and I say, "Hold it." That was the kind of jobs I was getting. So I got an audition for a little tiny part in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. and it was Mr. Oshkonagan, the cheese truck driver. And the situation is Steve Martin and John Candy are hitchhiking, and it's in a blizzard, and Mr. Oshkonagan picks them up, but he won't let them in the truck. He makes them ride in the back with the cheese. But there's no lines scripted. So I go in, and the director was, and today that wouldn't happen. You wouldn't have the director there in the room with you. Everything's taped, and especially small parts like that, you're never going to meet the director. But so he's telling me what the part is, and he said, so let's just I'll pretend I'm those guys, and if you want to ad-lib something. And I remembered, there's an old plumber's expression. It might be shit to you, but it's bread and butter to me. And so that's why I just gave him a little line. I said, okay, I'll give you guys a ride. He said, but I'm putting you back there in the trailer. I want you to be careful back there. That might be cheese to you, but it's bread and butter to me, pal. And he thought that was fantastic. And my agent calls me. I got hired. Now we were at that time, Heather and I were living together in Hollywood, and we had a little apartment that was $300 a month, and we didn't have it. And the agent calls me and says they hired you for one day on planes, trains, and automobiles, and you'll get $1,000.
Wow,
$1,000 for it. I was like, oh my God! I was so happy. And then he called back. I was so green. I knew nothing. Said, they decided they're going to shoot that scene in Buffalo, New York. I was like, Buffalo, New York? How in the fuck am I going to get to Buffalo, New York? By the time I go all the way to Buffalo, New York, I've spent the whole $1,000. He says, no. He said, they fly you to New York, they put you in a hotel, and you get paid for the travel day out there and the travel day back. So you get 3 days. I said, well, what do they pay me for the travel days? He said, $1,000. He said, so I'm getting $3,000? Yeah. Oh my God, that's 10 months rent. Like, holy shit. So I fly to Buffalo, New York, and I'm in Buffalo for 2 weeks, and they don't shoot the scene. Plus, the day I get there, a Teamster comes to my door, and he's got $150. And I was like, hey. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm supposed to be getting $1,000 a day. He said, per diem? I said, what's per diem? He said, that's your spending money. I said, I don't think I get spending money. He said, yes, that's what the $150 is. Holy shit. $150. So now I'm there. I'm sitting in a hotel, and I'm afraid to leave. I'm afraid they'll see me and send me back to LA, And it's one of those things, I keep adding it up over and over. Let's see, I got here Friday, and I've been here 9 days, and it's, oh my, it's just building. So then they called me down to the office and said, we're moving the company to Chicago. And I was like, so they're not going to do my scene? I go back to LA? And said, no, we'll take you with us. So, we'll shoot your scene in Chicago. Well, they didn't shoot the scene in Chicago. So I had 2 weeks in Buffalo, a couple of weeks in Chicago, St. Louis, Kankakee, Illinois, Woodstock, Ohio, Cleveland Hollow, Ohio, Quail Hollow, Ohio, 11 different cities, 51 freaking days.
Wow.
Before they shoot me saying that one, looking out the cab of the truck and saying that one line that I'd made up. And about halfway through, this was in St. Louis. I'm walking down a hallway, in the hotel, and I walked past a guy, and his last name was Mockless. I can't remember his first name. It might have been Gene. And I get a few steps past him. He was the showrunner. He was he was the producer who actually had to produce the movie, had to be there and make things work. And he stopped. He said, "Excuse me." I turned. I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you Troy Evans?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Troy, are you on a daily or a weekly?" Now, in the meantime, I had been wised up a little bit by some of my friends in LA. And it turns out I'm making that $7,000 a week, but under the SAG contract, since I was hired for the day, that they could convert me to a $2,500 weekly contract, right? So he says, "Are you on a daily or a weekly?" I said, I knew this was going to happen sooner or later, you know? I said, I'm on a day. Oh, Neil Motless. Nice man. I said, I'm on a, I'm on a daily, Neil. He said, oh. He said, well, I need to get you converted to a weekly. And I said, Neil, don't even think about it. Don't even bring it up. And he said, no, I guess that wouldn't be right. And that was like halfway through. So I made like an extra 20 grand.
Wow.
And I didn't think he was going to not do it. I was just fucking around, you know. I was just, never occurred to me he'd actually take me seriously. And so when I left, we were trying to pay for our $300 a month rent, and when I got home, we bought our first house.
Wow.
Yeah. So that, and I'll tell you an irony of that. You know, the kind of actor I am normally, when you see me in a movie, I'm working for 5 or 6 weeks, and I'm making $5,000 or $6,000 a week. It's kind of the, you know, yeah. I'm not a movie multimillionaire. That was the first. I've done 60 movies. That's the most money I've ever made on a movie. One line in Flying Automobiles, my first movie, over $50,000.
It's like one of the most expensive lines in Hollywood history, probably.
Yeah. I just, and 9 times out of 10, if you see the movie, I'm not in it, because it's awfully easy to, especially on TV. I'm almost always cut out.
Oh wow, yeah.
But I still get a residual check. I still make now in 2020. I'll probably make $500 this year in residuals on that, because they always play that at the holidays. They always play it at Thanksgiving, and it tends to go. The amounts go down and down and down, but still, that was a very good job.
Yeah, I watch that movie every year. I know that because it's my tradition. No matter where I am on Thanksgiving, I watch that every year. So
let me tell you another quick story about that. Yeah. So I'm sitting in the Westin O'Hare, which to me, I didn't know hotels like that existed. I'm in a hotel room with 3 TVs in it. You know, a TV in the bathroom. You know, the little suite at the Westin O'Hare. And I'm just sitting up there having my room service, and it's the day of the Academy Awards. And the phone rings, and it's John Candy, who I have never met, because I'd only been on the movie for 5 or 6 weeks, you know. And he said, Troy? I said, yes, this is Troy. He said, Troy, this is John Candy. I said, hello, John. He said, Troy, he said, I'm having a few people over to watch the Academy Awards tonight and wondered if you'd like to join us. God, I was so excited. Now, I didn't have any I left home with 1 change of clothes, so I bought a few things along the way, but not much. So I didn't have any way to dress up or anything, you know, but I took a shower and went up to John. I'm thinking I'll get to, you know, hang with the producers and the director, and, you know, and none of those people are there. You know who is there? All the people like me. Wow. He went through the company list, and he invited all the people who were nobody and had them all up to his room and got like $1,000 in room service. And we watched the Academy Awards. It was lovely. And it was the first time in my life I had money to spend. You know, I was getting $50 a day per diem, you know? So, and I mean, literally, he got at least $1,000 worth of room service. And there were only like 10 of us up there, you know, but he got a huge amount of room service. So on the way out, I tried to give him $200 for the, you know, towards the food. And I'll remember this as long as I live. John Candy said, Troy, that's been taken care of.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I loved him.
Too bad he died so young. He was such a great talent. I mean, I don't know. One of my favorites.
Yeah. And you'll never hear a bad story about him.
Oh, I know.
You know, he was always the good guy.
That's awesome. And you said that you knew John Wells. Is that how you got on ER then? Or,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I worked with this woman that he was married to back in the early 80s, named Belinda Wells, and she was at PCPA. And John Wells, they knew each other from college at Carnegie, I believe. They both went to Carnegie. And so then he started writing and producing. And he produced I don't remember the name of it, but a TV pilot about a family of carpenters. And had me on that as a recurring character as a building inspector. And it never, we did the pilot and it never went past that. And then he was one of the writers on a series called China Beach. And which that was the Vietnam nurses. Dana Delaney and Mark Helgenberger both became stars off that show, and both deservedly. And I love both of them very much. And so here's another. There's different ways to look at careers, and I have actors, and I respect this. Actors who just, if the part isn't good and the money isn't good, they won't do it. And they've been that way and they fight and scratch, and sometimes that works, for Powers Booth, for instance, he never did a small part.
No.
Ever. But my thing has always been take every job. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And on China Beach, they asked me to come in either the end of the first season or the beginning of the second season, and play this. It was another one of these parts that wasn't really scripted, and it was a thing where Dana and Marg had been sent back to the U.S. for some reason, and they put them through this sort of humiliating routine when they got back, sprayed them with disinfectant, yelled and screamed at them, and all this macho military bullshit.
Yeah. And
so that was what the part was just for me to come in and play. I'd been an infantry sergeant and played this badass sort of Arlie Ermy kind of character, just screaming shit at these two women. And I did that. And then a few weeks later, they had me come back as the motor pool sergeant. And then I did 3 or 4 of those, the motor pool sergeant. And then the following year, they made me a series regular on China Beach. And then, unfortunately, it got canceled not long after that. But that was my first, turn as a series regular. And that was all because of John Wells. And then he did, he started ER. And when he very first, which I think that was 92. And he called me, it was a very nice call. Said it was a little part, but he would really appreciate it if I would do it to be Noah Wiley's first patient, who was a police officer who'd been shot in the leg. And then later you find out, I think they ended up cutting this out, but you found out it was actually his wife who'd shot him. He said he'd shot himself accidentally in the leg, but his wife had shot him at home in a little family disagreement. And so I did that, the pilot. And then 6 years went by, and then Abe Ben-Ruby, for his own reasons, I don't know exactly why, he was playing the desk clerk, in the hospital, and he left. And they called me up about 11 o'clock one night. Would you be interested in being the new desk clerk on ER? And I was like, well, I'd have to think about it. Hell yes. I did 129 episodes, I think, of ER.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
the last 9 years, 2000, 2009.
Yeah, I never realized until a few years ago, well, maybe going on 10 years ago when it was going off the air or something, or whenever it ended, I went back to rewatch all the episodes, and I never realized how many episodes there were. I was renting all the DVDs from like a Hollywood Video and watching them all with my ex-girlfriend.
It's like 340 or 350, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, something. It was a lot. I mean, we somehow made it through it in a like year or two. So
yeah,
that was like all we were watching. What kind of advice would you give to anybody that's interested in acting?
Well, boy, that's a very tough question.
Yeah.
Because and I just touched on it a little bit, like, I guess the big thing is that there isn't an answer.
Yeah.
And there isn't a way to do it. And for instance, the thing that I just talked about the way that I've done, which is and I've done lots of parts that lots of actors would turn down. Yeah. And people say, how do you pick your parts? If they'll hire me to do a part, that's the part I pick. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, that works out pretty well. That may lead to something else down the road. Now, it may have kept me from moving up the ladder and becoming a more substantial character actor, one of the guys who's really up there in the club. But on the other hand, I'm pretty happy with the stuff I've gotten to do. Yeah. And so, but you have to make those choices yourself and I totally understand why people would say, well, I'm not going to do that stuff I don't feel like doing. Mm-hmm. Good for you. But the other thing is, there are all these theories of acting. I'm sure you're aware of the method. Yeah. And there's God knows how many interpretations of what the method is. The great John Barrymore line. Somebody said, are you a method actor? He said, there are a lot of methods. Mine happens to be a bottle of bourbon and a monstrous talent. and then you've got Harrison Ford, who I have infinite respect for. And what Harrison Ford says is, I belong to the let's pretend school of acting. Let's pretend that I'm the president of the United States in a hijacked airplane. And you do that. So I guess what I'm trying to get to in my kind of winding kind of way is, particularly if you get to it like in LA or New York, where there are tens of thousands of people trying to be actors, there are all kinds of people also selling the solution and all kinds of acting classes you can get in and I tell people, do all that stuff. Anything you have time for, you have the money for. If it's too much money, don't do it, because that shit doesn't cost money. It costs some money to have a little space and go in. But if somebody is trying to rack you for big sums of money for acting classes, go somewhere else. There are people who do it for nearly free. And the most important thing is to not adapt the idea that whoever you're giving this $50 to for this class this month has the answer. He might have some stuff that interests you that you can incorporate into your personal style. But that's, find your own method and stick with it and do it. And as we know, in my case, from the stories I've already told you, it's the people that you meet along the way. It's the, it sounds like corruption. It's not. It's the same in every business. Oh yeah. The people you know. If I hadn't met John Wells, now I would have done something, but I wouldn't have done ER. I wouldn't have done China Beach. Yeah. And then who knows how many other opportunities would have been missed because those productions raised my profile, and so I guess the simplest answer is, if you want to be an actor, you just have to keep at it, and it's not easy. Yeah. Because in LA, I don't know what the figure is, but there's at least 10,000 actors available for every part. So of course it's going to be hard, and that's another thing. Assuming that there's a young actor listening to this, you may get disappointed. There's a part you really want, but the thing I've told myself this 1,000 times: no other actor ever got my part. I don't care how good I was in that audition. If Dick Reilly got it, it's Dick Reilly's part.
Yeah.
No, so forget that and go on to the next thing.
I mean, I think it's basically, there's nobody. You just weren't right for that role, and that doesn't mean you're a bad actor. It just wasn't what the person was looking for.
Yeah. Now,
yeah.
Here, I'll tell you. You ever watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I got an audition. So this is what, 15 years ago, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
At least 10.
Yeah.
And the part was fantastic. It was a 800-pound, 6,000-year-old lizard man, and the lizard man was a wizard and evil and very angry because someone had put a curse on him 6,000 years ago and turned him into this giant lizard. So he had to have these people follow him around, and because lizards have to be wet or they die, So he had to have all these minions who sprayed water on him, and this fantastic speech, Shakespearean rant about, because he'd been plotting the end of the world for thousands of years over this horrible thing that was done to him. He was going to destroy the whole world. So I go to the audition, and I get there a little early, and I sit down, and the casting director comes in, and she was so nice. And she said, "Oh, Troy, I've tried to get you in here so many times, and you were always doing something else. And then this part came, and I'm so excited that you could be here. I'm so, that's nice to hear." And she goes in, and then the director comes by. The director stops, and going in the room and says, and he was a guy that I worked for on Life Goes On. He said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you here." And they go in. And then these three producers come by, and they said, "You may not know us, but we produce." And they've been on something. They've been producers on something else I worked on, and they were so happy to see me. And then they go in the room, and they're in the room about half an hour. And meanwhile, the waiting room is filling up because they schedule these, like every 10 minutes an audition or something. And there's more and more and more actors, and they're not seeing anybody. And finally, they come out and call me and say, "Troy, can you come in?" So I go in. They said, "Sorry to keep you waiting. We got in here and we started telling Troy Evans stories. Everybody had a Troy Evans story, and we were just laughing." So then I told a few Troy Evans stories, and then we do the audition piece. And I'd worked on it, and I can do rage. And have you ever ridden one of those things or seen them in a movie? Those carnival rides where it's like a giant barrel, and you stand against the side of the barrel, and it spins around. Then they remove the floor, and the centrifugal force just holding it. That's what the audition was like. As I'm doing the audition, it was like all those people in the room were blown back against the wall, and it was a triumph. I smoked it. And finished it, hugs all around. Everybody's so happy, and I leave. Well, I never think I have the part. Because and I don't think that I don't have the part. But it's just there's so many variables that I never go home. I never punish myself with that. Well, I got this one, because that way madness lies. But in this case, I couldn't conceive that I didn't have this part. And another thing I don't do, I don't call up the agent and say, "Hey, I auditioned for that." Whatever it was, that LA Law, and we haven't heard from him. Can you call up, find out? Because all that's going to happen, they're going to call up, and the casting director is going to say, "No, we didn't hire him. He came in, he stunk up the room." Why? Why would I want to initiate that exchange? I know I already know I didn't, but in this case, I was so sure that I had it based on all those interactions that I called the agent. Now I'm thinking, well, maybe they pushed the episode back for a week or something, and that's why they haven't called. I said, I went in on that Buffy. Can you call and see what's going on? And the agent calls me back a few minutes later. I said, "Troy," he said, they loved you. They loved you. But the executive producer felt they needed to go a little younger. with the 6,000-year-old lizard.
Maybe a 3,000-year-old.
Yeah. I'm just a little too long in the tooth for the 6,000-year-old guy. Yeah. If we were doing a 7,000-year-old lizard man, you'd be perfect. Oh,
That's
so,
funny.
but you can't beat yourself up.
No, because it's what they it's eventually that person's part. Yeah.
Yeah, and the director and the casting director, they have an image in their head, and you go in, you do your best to make what you're doing be their image, but sometimes sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I've directed a couple features myself, like low budget ones, but we went through 3 different people for the lead in one of my movies. It just didn't work out with 2 people, and then the person that ended up getting it turned out to be what we were looking for the whole time, basically. So, you never know.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, this is Michael E. Cullen II from the podcast that you're listening to right now, along with
Matthew Haas.
We just wanted to tell you about our great podcast
Super.
called Super. It's called All Too Real. And on that show, what do we do, Matt?
We watch biopics, and then we talk about whether or not the movie matched up with the real story or not.
So
It was a lot more exciting than that, though.
Yeah, so we analyze the real story and the real story.
Get it?
Get it?
Real.
Yeah, they're spelled differently,
Yeah.
folks. You can guess which one I said which way.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, so sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. But we talk about great movies like Shattered Glass and The Social Network and Futile and Stupid Gesture, among others. Those are some of the ones that we've covered so far, and we're going to cover a lot more. So please subscribe on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your great, fun podcasts. And be sure to share it with your friends.
Do it.
And make sure you're not afraid to get all too real. Bye-bye.
How are things going on Bosch? Are you back to filming, or?
We're back to filming. We started about a week ago. They are, of course, it's very difficult with the COVID procedures.
Yeah.
But they're really bending over backwards to make it safer. But in my case, I had the virus in March.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Holy shit. 72-year-old fat guy had it and lived to tell, man.
I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
Was it pretty bad?
It was pretty bad, but this is where I was really lucky. I was one of those people, and you probably know if you've read about it at all, that the symptoms vary a lot.
Yeah.
And in my case, I had a bad temperature only one day. I was very sick for 2 weeks, but only one day did my temperature go over 100, and then it went back down into the high 90s. And I never had it in my lungs, and I never had the cough. And now this, I'm not giving you this as like a scientific fact.
Yeah.
But it's anecdotal observation by doctors that it turns out in January I had a physical and I was vitamin D deficient, which happens to a lot of old guys. You don't get enough sunlight, and when you are in the sun, you're wearing sunblock, and you don't get the vitamin D you need. He said you have to take a vitamin D pill. So I started doing that in January, and it turns out they're noticing. Now this hasn't been proven in a test, so I'm not saying that, but doctors are noticing that a lot of people who have the experience I had of getting sick but not getting their lungs filled, not getting pneumonia, not getting the terrible cough, are people who are on vitamin D.
Wow.
So I tell everybody, I'm not saying it will keep you from getting it, but it's something you can do that costs nothing. There's no danger to you from taking a vitamin D supplement. It's not expensive. And
I take one myself. I work a third shift job, so I have to. I've been taking vitamin D for years just because of that. So I guess that's a good thing. in case I get
absolutely.
it or something. I mean, if that does happen, that does help. So are they? Are the days longer and everything on Bosch because of the COVID?
No, the days are about the same length, but I think they'll have more days, more shoot days.
Yeah.
And they're, I'm so appreciative of the company because they're spending a fortune.
Yeah.
They have, I don't know how many, they've hired a ton of extra people, and everywhere you look, there's some guy with a sprayer, and they've got a hand cleaner, and everything you touch, they offer you hand cleaner, and they've got masks, and they'll give you packages of masks to take home, and they're just, the crew they're all masked, and everybody who goes on the tests on the set is tested every morning.
Wow, that's good.
Before you go on the set, they do the nose, and it's not the back of the. Have you had any tests?
No, not yet. But yeah.
So there's one that's it sounds worse than it is, but it's where they slide a long Q-tip back into your sinuses. That's not pleasant. No. Now the one that they're doing on Bosch is now the one that I just described to you. That supposedly is the most accurate one.
Yeah.
And I've had several of those on Bosch, and technically I shouldn't have to take it because I already have it. I've had it, and I have the antibodies, but everybody has to do it.
Yeah.
So, okay, fine.
Better to do that,
Then the one that they do every day is they swab both nostrils, and it's just a Q-tip in your nostril, and that's it. It's not invasive.
Oh, that's good.
And that's a 15-minute test.
Oh, wow.
And then, but nobody gets on the set without being tested.
Yeah, because I was wondering how they were doing that, because I heard of a lot of shows going back to filming, and I was wondering, because I started seeing like soap operas going back first and everything, and I was like wondering how those, because that's crazy, but
and then also,
good to know that they're coming back.
If you're like the star, like if you're Titus has a big trailer and deserves and needs, and then we're in what they call a 3-banger. You know what that is? It's a long trailer. It's broken up into 3 little dressing rooms that are pretty decent. They're certainly all that I need, and normally then those are used by whoever's working. Like if I'm working tomorrow, I'll use it, and then the next day, if I'm not working, they put some other actor in there. This year they're not doing that.
Yeah.
So they're spending. So they have to have more space, more trailers, more. Everything's more. But I have, and normally I only work a day or 2 per episode. So they're paying for a trailer to be there. For out of the average week, it's there 6 days unused for the one day that I'm there.
Wow. So. Yeah. Well, they got to do what they got to do. Unfortunately, it's hopefully this all gets figured out someday soon, and that the government will start to believe that it actually is real. But
yeah, and I'll tell you, this is just a little personal thing that aggravates me a little bit when I hear these people denying it. That I have a 65-year-old brother who lives in New Orleans, and he and his girlfriend got sick, and they came and got her and took her to the hospital where she died.
Oh, wow.
And he died alone in that apartment.
Oh,
and he didn't get his ID with him, and he laid in a John Doe freezer for 4 months before we could even find him.
Oh my God.
I mean, you don't think of that happening in the United States of America in 2020.
It's so sad.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
And it's just, it's pretty horrifying.
Yeah, because I've had a few friends that their dads have passed away from it, and it's sad.
Where are you located?
I'm in Ohio, Toledo, Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the.
Oh.
Yeah, our governor was doing good, and then he changed things and opened up too soon on certain things, I think. So, I don't know, Mike DeWine.
Yeah.
So it's just hard to say. I mean, he was one of the best at first, and now I just don't know what he's doing. I think he's kowtowing to the deniers of stuff and certain things. So because there's a lot of places I think that are open that shouldn't be open.
Yeah.
Or at least,
and there's anything you're going to open. There's like, you know, what we're doing on Bosch, it's very onerous. It's just a pain in the ass. You know, we're wearing masks in between takes, and then, you know, they say rolling, and you have to take your mask off. And it's funny because it's happened. You know, I've just worked a little bit, but it's happened several times that you'll be just starting the scene, and you'll have to say, Greg, are you going to take your mask off? You know they're going to get into the editing room, and there's going to be some guy in there in the scene with a mask on.
I have a short film I was working on right before the pandemic that I want to finish, and I think I'm going to write the masks into the scenes I need to film just to get it finished.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because But yeah, it's crazy. Is there anything you wanted to share with anybody before we wrap things up? I don't want to take much more of your time here.
Oh no, but it certainly has been pleasant chatting with you. And I just I appreciate you taking the time, being interested in a funky old actor, man.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, have to have you on again because I love your stories. They're great.
Oh well, I do stories, so. So yeah. Reach out. I'd be happy to do another one. You're very pleasant to talk to, and you know it may be that when you air it, I don't know how much feedback you get, but it may be that you'll get something from some people that will suggest some questions we could entertain.
Yeah, I'll have people send them some questions about you or the entertainment industry in general and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
You're an excellent interviewer. I had a great time. I wish you the best. Yeah. And remember, flush the turd November 3rd.
Yes. Thank you. Stay healthy. Thanks.
Okay, that was my interview there with Troy Evans. I hope to have him back on the show again sometime soon. He was a great storyteller, as I said before. What's on your mind today, Matt, before we close things up here?
Not much. Just you know, usual stuff. Just you know, just hang in there. Try to, at least. That's what I'm trying to do. You know, just be nice to people. All the basic stuff, really. You know, stuff that, you know, we learned as children. Just kind of try to be more patient with people. I'm really kind of talking to myself, actually.
Yeah. Well, something the other day when I was at the doctor's, I was talking to a nurse there, and it made me realize that when we were kids, you remember cooties? Like how you would have cooties?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so you wouldn't touch the girls or you wouldn't touch the boys or whatever because they had cooties or whatever.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing. You know, defending yourself from COVID is very similar. So I think we learned this shit when we were kids, people. Let's just pretend. Right. Let's just pretend everybody has cooties, and there is no shot for the cooties yet. There is no cootie shot.
Right.
That's all we got to do. Just pretend that, okay? Just pretend you're back in, you know, first grade or whatever, and you know.
Yeah.
If they can understand it, why can't we?
Right.
And why can't we be friends? We can't be friends because we're not allowed to get 6 feet away from each other.
Exactly. God damn it. And that cooties is not, you know, a satanic conspiracy, you know, or the Obamas, or, you know, Jewish billionaires or whatever that, you know.
Bill Gates or George Soros or the Rothschilds or some lizard people from the planet Xenop or something. You know, I'm just saying.
No, get your facts right, Mike. It's from the Draco star system. Come on.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Where's Xenop?
And the moon is their kind of their spacecraft power / you know, Death Star. Come on, if you're gonna make fun of the conspiracy theories, you gotta get, you know, right.
Oh, that's right. Xenop is where all the werewolves live, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it is.
The werewolf people.
Well, only blue werewolves. Only the color blue. Specifically blue. There might be an indigo in there here and there every once in a while, but that's abnormality.
And they're treated like shit because they look different, right?
Yeah, pretty much on every planet. Yeah.
So there's racism there too. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, indigo lives matter, man. Anyways, what the fuck am I talking about, people? Anyways, so I think Matt and I need to go like get sleep or something. Yeah. So hope you enjoyed that interview there with Troy Evans. Great guy. Like I said, I can't wait to have him on the show again. Hear some more stories from him about his life. It was just fascinating. So, you know, be good to each other, like and share and all that good stuff this episode, and, you know, visit our Patreon.
Yeah.
Do it.
Do it.
Shia LaBeouf would say. Anyways, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to All Too Real 2 podcast, a Cullen Park production. Produced and edited by Michael E. Cullen II. Music by Matthew Hawes. Subscribe and share the show. Visit us at cullenpark.com.